And like I said, this is labor that I've done. I've worked in this fishery, and to get to show my family and friends that the work that they do is beautiful, that it is art, that it is important in the world, and to show that to them in an artistic lens was really important to me. So those were the drivers behind the piece.
Congratulations, let's have a round of applause, because I don't think I've ever seen that mosaic before, combining the dance, the movements, and we all recognized putting on the boots and fastening up, and they were all in did they spend a lot of time working on that to get all in sync, or was that a challenge?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time rehearsing, yeah.
But you could see the fishermen through the three women. I really loved how you could combine that, and great drone footage, beautiful footage of the area, you know, the place that we love.
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of that is filmed in my home, on the island that I live on, and in the waters surrounding. So.
Yeah. And explain where you live, because it is different than, I'm in Sitka, and that's where you grew up.
That's where I grew up, and I live west of Juneau on a very remote island called Tasta or Lemessurier in the middle of Icy Strait. And so all of those shots are from the middle of Icy Strait, or from Lemessurier Island, or from the community of Elfin Cove and the outer coast of Yakobi Island, all in the kind of southeast Alaska fishing grounds.
And when she says Icy Strait, that's really the gateway to Glacier Bay National Park, if you've seen that on the map. You know, not too far from Juneau, beautiful area, beautiful wild area. And aren't you and Bob the only people on that island?
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, you live on their own island. And
well,
so
it's not ours, but we do live there.
Yeah, and Kalea, your little daughter.
Yes, and our daughter.
Yeah, well, it's just wonderful.
Thank
and
you.
now turning to you two. Did you work as a team then on both of these films? Both the...
Yes. Generally, we have worked on, as a team, on a lot of different projects, but those two, I mean, there was a lot of people that came in and out through the process, but Tim's assistant news director, I'm the creative director, and generally get looked to for these type of bigger projects, so yes.
And this seemed like a major project, like it must have been a multi-month, multi-year, or how much time did you spend on both of these films?
I'm not a good...
I'm not sure how much time overall, but what's interesting for us working in news is that usually we're working on a story for a day or a couple days, but both of these we definitely delved completely into. I don't know how many times we went out to the Salton Sea, but probably a dozen days, you know, trying to get sunsets and sunrises and sitting and waiting for a bird or, you know, something like that. So a lot of time put into that. For the Colorado River, Kent and I were in an RV for 10 days together. Went up to the top of Poudre Pass where the Colorado River starts and spent the night there without electricity and power and cell phone service, and had an incredible experience just weaving our way back down to the Coachella Valley.
I do want to say about that particular part of it, we were at 10,200 feet where the Colorado River starts. And where it starts, it's just like a puddle of water. You saw kind of steam coming off. I would not have survived that trip if it were not for this man. Because at 10,200 feet, it's not that easy to breathe. And I am not physically fit, although this looks like I am. But this guy, he is like a competitive...
Oh, shucks.
I don't know what you call it, but he's always running long distances, and I had to have him carry everything. And you saw the 500 pounds of stuff that was in the back of it. So without him, that would have never, ever got made.
Good teamwork.
Absolutely.
10,000 feet, yeah, that is, you start to test your lungs there. So the Colorado, what an interesting journey though to go to basically the headwaters. And then did you follow it all the way down to like Glen Canyon Dam, or how did you, which parts did you focus on?
We started at the headwaters, and then we went up away from it and around and followed the runoff that goes the opposite direction of the Colorado, and then came back down to Denver, and then we met Angela in Denver, and then we kind of followed it through Colorado, and then we had to leave it at some point because the highways don't always follow it. But
Yeah, and then through the Grand Canyon and back down to the Coachella Valley. So just an incredible experience. If you haven't taken the time to see that part of the country, I mean, it is certainly beautiful. It's things you would just drive by and not spend time on, but it's gorgeous.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the graphics and how you did that and the statistics and the maps, because I'm a map person. I don't know who did the maps.
well, it was a team effort. On the Colorado River project, I have a graphic designer. Her name's Hannah Shaver, and I looked at her when we were assigned this project, and I said, I really need you on this, and she goes, okay, because she knew how big of a project would be. So she's not here, she's actually at work, but because a lot of that was because of Hannah. So
Cheers to Hannah. Thank Hannah for us, because I think when you're looking at a river like the Colorado, I mean, it's such a long river and it goes through so many states and environments. It was really helpful. Just it gave us a picture, you know, from being right in the rapids, which looks like you had a little dunk there.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Interesting story. So I jumped in, and you can just kind of float. And I'm sitting there floating, having a good time, and I'm floating this way, and the raft is floating that way, and there's an island in the middle, and I just kept going, and the boat disappeared, and I didn't know if we would meet again. But the river came back together, and there was the boat. So I wasn't really sure if I was gonna.
before the Class 3 rapids that happened.
Yes.
Like go all the way into the Sea of Cortez.
I wasn't sure.
When there's a little trickle, I mean, I flew over that once and I was shocked. The first time I saw the Sea of Cortez, and I saw what little trickle of water goes into the Sea of Cortez. It's just basically like the headwaters. It's like a little trickle, at least at the time I flew over it. Maybe it's worse now, or maybe there's more water. I don't know. Worse probably.
Where, at the Sea of Cortez?
Yeah, where it
I
comes
doubt
in.
I doubt anything goes into the Sea of Cortez.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, by the time it gets past the Coachella Valley, there isn't much, because it all gets diverted into the Coachella Valley, Imperial Irrigation District, Palo Verde Irrigation District. A lot of the water is allocated for them, and what does get past that goes to Mexico. Has an allotment. I don't think much gets past that, and it's very little. I wanted to say that I lived in Juneau for a very, very long time.
So we just found this out tonight.
Yeah, so I really appreciated everything I saw because it was like I was watching a movie from home. So yeah, there's a connection somehow. I don't know how.
I'm sure Teddy put you in this group because of that, because he kind of has that way of programming things so that there's always connections between filmmakers. Do you notice that? Yeah. So that's really well, two different stories. The Salton Sea, and how many of you have been to the Salton Sea? So, did you agree with the descriptive words that people, you know, the stinkiness and it's pretty polluted. I mean, pretty toxic.
I have to say though, so like being in the Coachella Valley, that is what I thought of it, and that was the smells you get every once in a while or whatever. But when you're there, you actually don't get the smell. I didn't get the smell, and the beauty is amazing. Those were my feet that were sinking into the grossness there. It's when you step a little closer that you find out that how the depths of what's going on there. Those shoes are no longer with us.
That's and the dust. The problem with dust. Now, do you get a sense that that's affecting Palm Springs during big dust storms? Does it come down this far to?
Yeah. So what's interesting is it wasn't really talked about. It wasn't really an issue until I'm not sure how many years ago, but we had a haboob that pushed all the dust, and that smell.
2017, 2018.
Yeah, but that smell made its way to LA, and then suddenly it was a talker because it wasn't just impacting the Coachella Valley, it had made its way to LA. So then all of a sudden the AQMD started paying attention and putting out odor alerts and things like that. But it needed that to get the attention, I guess, to start paying attention.
And that's a great term that I think I first heard in Palm Springs. Haboo, right?
Yeah, which is literally like a wall of sand. I mean, it is it's something you would think you would only see in the Sahara, but it happens here in the Coachella Valley.
I drove through one of those clouds once down by Anza Borrega, and it put pock marks in my windshield. I had to change my windshield. I couldn't see through the windshield when the sun was coming in. So they can be pretty serious, the dust. And
Well, yeah, as more playa is revealed as the water recedes, and then a thunderstorm comes in, and all that downward force of all that wind coming out of the thunderstorm picks up that playa, and that's what causes the giant haboob that pushes its way towards Los Angeles and other directions. And so that's where it picks up all that toxicity and blows it in our direction.
It is amazing for in my opinion, the biggest looming environmental disaster in California that nobody knows about or pays attention to.
yeah, very important work that people are familiar with it, and the Colorado, and this whole thing with the water rights, which is so interesting that the state of California claims that right, and after all these years, has the precedence over, we claimed it first, when it really should belong to everybody. The tribes,
Certainly the tribes,
villages,
yeah.
the agriculture needs to be shared, but I find that interesting that you can claim something and it can still hold, as get the senior rights, so to speak, like the gold rush, same idea. But water is something we all need to survive, so it is interesting to me that would hold, that it would hold in the courts, that there wouldn't be a ruling that would say, okay, California, that was back in whatever year, and now it's 2024, and we need to share it more. But then the food issue is pretty important too, with Imperial Valley and all the food that's produced there for the entire country, so that I can see that as a strong driver.
Up till now, the federal government has taken the position that the states need to figure it out, because they assume you don't want the federal government to come in and tell you how to figure it out. So because of that, that's why there's this fighting between all the states and how they're trying to resolve it, because they don't want the federal government to decide who gets what. And the Salton Sea doesn't have any water rights. There's nothing there that has rights to make sure that there's water in it. So if it were to file for water rights, it would be at the bottom of the list, because all of these other places and people have filed well before it for hundreds of years. So in my personal opinion, and the views that I hold by no means represent the company I work for or any of the people that worked on the project, but the only way to really, the Salton Sea issue will ever get solved is if they just cover it with rocks, because it's not ever going to get full of water unless they build a recreation area maybe at the northern end, but that's really what you have to look forward to.
So there's no possibility of like 100-year flood that would break dams and
I
flood up?
don't know if I want to be there for that,
No.
but that would mean that the Hoover Dam would be broken.
What's interesting with the Salton Sea is that it's been talked about for so long, and so much money has gone into studying it and talking about it, but nothing's been done. And I think we've probably crossed the point where it's too late.
It's a sad thing when you think about the history and use, and that people enjoyed the area, that you can see the beach umbrellas up there and people having a nice time, but and the birds. So many species that are no longer using the Salton Sea, right?
Yeah, even in my time, I've been working out here for 19 years, and when I first started working here, I could go out to the Salton Sea and see all those birds. You could see all those different kinds of birds, and it took a lot of effort to sit and wait and try and find. And you're not finding the big birds. You're not finding the big storks and all that kind of stuff. You're finding smaller birds. It's a huge difference in a short amount of time.
How about some questions from the audience about these works that we just viewed? Do we have any questions? Yes, let's bring a mic down to the floor here so we can hear you.
Yeah, I was wondering, what is the trend on, like, the local health as it's being impacted? Like we saw that city Mecca, there was some issues there, but is it trending towards worsening the health aspects of like what's going on in the Salton Sea or even the Colorado River?
I mean, I'm not a doctor, but yes, I mean, it's getting worse. I mean, so this, as you can tell by the masks, you know, that was made in 2021, and so even the data and information that we had on there, you know, it's much worse than it has been. They've done a lot of studies on PM10, which is like the really tiny particles, so it's not even the sand you see, it's the stuff you don't see that gets into your lungs that has an impact. It's the really, really tiny particles that like your body can't filter out. And it's they're just starting to learn how bad that is for you.
And is it getting worse?
Yeah, but yes, definitely.
I would say it's getting worse, but it's not just because of the Salton Sea. When Tropical Storm Hillary came through, it disturbed a lot of surface area around the Coachella Valley and east of us, and because of that, now we're seeing my personal opinion. I'm not a meteorologist, but I feel like there's more wind coming in this time of year, or these last couple of years, and that's blowing all of that, raising all that off the ground, and that's mixing with everything that's coming from the eastern side where the Salton Sea is. So honestly, I believe it's 20 years from now. I don't know, but I don't see it getting better.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So a through line that I was kind of thinking about with all three of these films is outdoor location being a key aspect of the process, and I was really curious your creative process, how you / do you view environment as a character?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. Well, I think it's crucial because the story is about relationship. It's always about relationship, right? And for my piece, you know, with the community that I'm from, we are water people and we are salmon people, and that's an integral part of the story. And so that has to be at the center. So yeah, and maybe it's got to be at the center of the story, and then also I guess just aesthetically, artistically is like figuring out how do you tell that. For me, one of the ways it was important to tell that was through just some sound recordings, field recordings. So actually some of the sound that's in there, a friend of mine has been part of a very cool sound collection project that's collecting sounds all in Glacier Bay National Park and surrounding areas. And so a lot of that was some clips that he took of jumping salmon and harbor seals and birds to really try to anchor us in that experience. I think I always think it's a fallacy to take humans outside of the environment, right? That's a huge part of the challenge that we're dealing with, is this idea that we are separate from what we are inside of. And I think that if we can, in our work, show that interdependence, then that can be a really beautiful reminder of that relationship that exists. So that's one stab at answering that question.
I would say what's interesting is that like both the Colorado River and the Salton Sea, I think what they have in common is a lot of people are making decisions about it and talking about it, but not experiencing it or living it. And I think that's a shame. And it was, you know, the time that we were able to spend out at the Salton Sea and the time that we were able to spend with the Colorado River was essential to being able to understand it. And I wish more of maybe our lawmakers or decision makers actually spent the time to be in the environment to make those decisions. I don't know if that answers your question there, but.
I don't know if I'm gonna answer your question either, but I can tell you that I'm mostly made of water. And I grew up, as I said, in Southeast Alaska on the coast, and I mean, I would see the snow and the rain fall onto the mountains, and I would watch it fall down the side of the mountain and then go into the ocean, and then I'd watch the salmon go up the river, and there's a cycle that's continuously happening. In Alaska, we would say that the only time you really want to visit there is late July and the first few weeks of August, because that's when life occurs. That's when the water comes down out of the mountains, the salmon come up the stream, the bear comes and eats, the flocks of eagles come and swarm all over everything. And water is absolutely the most important thing to human life. And it is the most important character in almost anything, any type of story that I would like to tell. And when I was growing up, I would always say, I cannot imagine that I would ever live in a place that does not have water around me. And I live in the Coachella Valley. So I'm drawn to the Salton Sea. I'm drawn to the Colorado River. I feel like I need to be there. So yes, absolutely. It's a character in that it is us. So that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Well stated on the water.
Well, first of all, I want to say those films were Salton Sea, Colorado River, were so magnificently done. And I've seen many films on Salton Sea because I am a local here for many years. And the other question I have is, you just touched on a little bit of it, but how can those of us who do live here make a difference? I know I'm friends with Dr. Raul Ruiz, and I think that they are trying to bring in all the battery, the stuff you mentioned, but yet all the people who have been living there for years are being affected now and will be affected in the future. So what do we do about it?
It's a great question, and I don't know that there's a short-term answer because it takes so long to get anything started and going and get movement on anything. I think just, like in that timeline, there was a period where it was forgotten about and not talked about, and I think maybe the thing that people can do is let it not be forgotten about and talked about. Like, it always has to be an issue, it always has to come up, so that somebody is always working on it. And I think that's what's important, is that it's always an issue that's up front.
You can't just talk to Dr. Raul Ruiz. There's more people that you need to pile on to everybody. Anybody that has a voice in a place that can make a decision, you need to be contacting them, because the choices that they make are what affect us. And I noticed when we were making the Salton Sea portion of that project, as we were making it and we were calling around and wanting to ask questions and interview people, suddenly things were starting to happen. Like, there was action being taken. We were getting press releases from all kinds of agencies about what they were doing and what was coming up and why they wanted us to report about those things. And those things didn't start happening, I felt like, until Angela started asking a lot of questions. And so I think when you can put pressure on your political leaders, no matter what party they are a part of, I think you can affect change in that way. And I think that's really important, to take that action as a member of the public, a member of the voting public, to hold the lawmakers to task, like the Colorado River Keeper said in the Colorado River piece. If the lawmakers aren't doing the things that you need them to do, you need to change the lawmakers.
Is there a way of creating a website that people can go to and know who to contact locally?
Not within my expertise, but I'm certain that there's probably plenty of people out there that could do that, yeah.
I mean, it takes more than one person. So, I mean, Sonny Bono is a big mission. It couldn't happen. Dr. Ruiz is really enthusiastic about it, but one person can't do anything. It has to be a group effort. It has to be a focus.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So I'm good at collecting people to do that, but who do we actually break down and contact besides who I know?
I don't know that I have the answer, but
Okay.
but I think it takes the public to come together and ask for change, right? And that's your voice with a vote, or that's your voice with whatever it might be. Our job is to maybe bring up the issues and shine light on them, but that the public has to do something about it.
Well, and it is a public health issue, which makes me think that it also could involve, more executive branch administration, governor. We have a decent governor, maybe more, pressure on his department, whoever handles public health, water.
Or Department of Interior.
Well, that would be for federal,
Right,
but
but-
for the state, there's a California State Department of Interior, is that what it's?
I think so. I don't
So
know what it's
something
called,
or
but there is a
land-
state version of that.
Yeah, state version of that, because, you can do things, you can make, sometimes it's harder with the bureaucracy, but if you have a good governor and a good staff, and it's a public health issue, and you've got kids with asthma and, dust affecting people's breathing maybe here,
Really bad.
so maybe that would get people to move a little bit on it. But there is no easy solution. You said rocks, putting rocks all over. How many rocks would we need?
Well,
To cover the
honestly
salt sea.
a lot. But
Yeah.
that's what they did in Lake Owens, is they covered it with large, like gravel rock in order to keep the dust from blowing off.
Oh, they did?
So that is what is in our future. Honestly, that's my belief.
Donate a rock. Yeah. Yes.
On the Salton Sea, the wetlands project and the lithium projects are great individual projects. But what I'm hearing is even though all the studies that have been done with all the alternative solutions, there's no consensus on what the solution is. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
And
because every square mile is owned by a different person. The whole sea is not owned by an entity. You saw the grid pattern if you were watching. There's multiple agencies and tribes and organizations that own pieces under the water and around the water. So they all have to decide.
But it's also, it takes so much time, it's spanned over such an amount of time, that even those agencies have different people in charge of them over that amount of time. So even if an agency has a thought on it, by the time they act on it, somebody else is in charge. So it just doesn't go anywhere.
One further question. The one proposal to do the underground tunnels from the Sea of Cortez, what is wrong with that solution?
It's just money and nobody wants to pay for it.
And
I think also it would need Mexico to say yes to it, and they don't have a reason to do that.
Well, this has been, now I'm thinking about our ice in Alaska, and just a footnote that I was thinking about when thinking about water and the Colorado River and shortage of water for people in California and all these different states. It reminded me of the history of Sitka, Alaska, that at one time we shipped ice to California before there was refrigeration. And it was shipped down by schooner or steamboat or what have you. And that's the way they kept things cold in San Francisco. And at one time, Sitka was bigger than San Francisco and Portland, and it was the Paris of the Pacific. And one of the things that we gave to the lower 48, as we would call it, was ice blocks that were carved out of the local lake that is still not 5 minutes from where I live and where you grew up. So just a little, there are solutions to the water crisis. Maybe we'll be shipping ice from Alaska, back
if
to
there's any
California.
left.
Yeah, if there's any left, 'cause we are losing the glaciers, that's another thing, like Peru.
I grew up near the Mendenhall Glacier, which has now, when I grew up, there was a wall, 600 or 700 feet tall, just right off the highway. And now that glacier has receded up into the mountains, and it's taken its feet out of the lake that it feeds, so it no longer is in the lake. That glacier water feeds a little creek that goes through all of the Mendenhall Valley, which is near Juneau. And that creek is red. And I was empathetic and relating to the story that I was watching up there. And it's because of all the iron that's in that water that's coming out of that, in that particular area of that creek. So, I mean, it's happening in a lot of different places.
And it's happening in the Brooks Range as well. And permafrost melt is part of it, but a lot of it is that iron it's exposed for the first time with the thawing of the permafrost, and there's more of that going on. So we are, I mean, I sympathize with Peru quite a bit in watching with that woman, the way she told the story, which I thought was beautiful in her own way, the way she had that relationship with the river and the water. It is life for all of us, and we're gonna have some major hurdles to have enough water for people in this world with climate change, so we better get on it. Yeah, on conservation would be my thinking there. Thank you, everybody. One last question. Did everybody get to ask that wanted to ask?
There was two
Yes.
right here.
I was just gonna ask, is there a place that we can share those shorts, like the troubled waters, with other people in the Coachella Valley?
KESQ.com.
They are available.
Yeah, they're on our website.
Oh, great. This was great to see it in this format, so
Yeah,
thank you.
To be honest with you, thank you for putting them together in that way, and thank you for inviting us to show this, because I've never seen them in their entirety. I've only seen the parts as I've worked on them and then gave them to Tim and then moved on to the next thing. I've never actually seen them like this. Like, and honestly, I've never seen them like from beginning to end as one thing. And it's been 3 or 4 years, 2 years since the first one, and I was like, oh crap, I did that. Oh, I don't remember. Oh yeah, I did that too.
Well, thank you. It was great watching it in this format. It was really eye-opening.
And if you're really interested, there's a lot of really fun behind-the-scenes videos of us doing our travels in our RV on there as well.
I made a lot of oatmeal. She had one question.
I think that sounds like a part 2.
I know the audio is really integral in everyone's piece, but I just specifically wanted to ask about Salmon Dance and how it was to overlay the audio, hearing like the splash and the puddles of the water with the choreography and that journey for you.
Am I still on? I'm still on. What specifically do you want to know about? There's so much I could tell you.
I'm thinking specifically the like footage of the hands interlacing, and then like seeing the droplets, and then also like even just the narration behind it, or even when they're just like dancing and you hear like the waves crashing.
Yeah. So I interviewed 8 or 9 fishermen for this piece, and then ultimately chose 3 different people whose voices to feature. And each of those interviews, you know, was about an hour and a half long. So I had a lot of audio that I spent a lot of time with. And then again, it was like how do I make poetry from these interviews? What are the most essential things that they say to tell their story and to weave these stories together? And then how do I line that up in sort of a collage in terms of a pattern? So that's how I worked with the voices. The hand section is really intense. If you caught that, that's real. I was out fishing with my brother and a friend's boat went down. And we were out and we were anchored up and there was nothing we could do except just listen on the VHF for a long time. And I had been out fishing with my brother to go out and remind myself, okay, I've been a deckhand before. What is it like to do this work again? Oh, right, I'm getting seasick again. Great, awesome. And to take a bunch of audio. So I had my recorder and I just turned it on and I listened for about an hour while a friend's boat went down outside Sitka and the Coast Guard had to come in, and fortunately they were rescued. And I sat on that for a long time. It was really, that was the most challenging piece to figure out how to deal with because it is so real. It's such a real part of our life and the experience. We've all lost people on the water. And when I interviewed Bruce, who you hear talking in that section, he's so just full of life and such a funny guy. And then he started to tear up when he talked about the people that he'd lost. And so I knew I had to put those two things together. And that the choreography then had to be simple. It had, like, I couldn't really even show a face. It had to be simple. And so the simplest thing that I could find was to be in the water with some gesture, with that audio. And then really, you know, the other pieces, I spent a lot of time choosing music to try to get the tone right. And then a lot of just different samples of field recordings. And that, I think, was just a lot of like playing with it, of what feels like the mood for this specific moment right here. So there's a lot of layering. I hope that answers your question.
I just want to add to that I tell my students that 70% of filmmaking is the sound. 70 to 80% of it is the sound. If you remember the piece with the Chef Freddy doing the dish, we didn't have any sound except for him talking for that. I added all that later. You have to be able to engage all of the human senses in order to make it an experience for them. And if you don't have good sound, it's not watchable. You can always listen to the radio. You can't watch TV without sound.
Can I just add one more thing on that and say that sound is the place that I started with this project. I did all of the interviews first, and then I did draft cuts of them, and then I made the choreography, and then I did more draft cuts, and then I did more choreography, and then I did the final cuts and the final choreography, and the filming came last. So the sound really was the main thing. You're all so incredible to stay so long.
This is a
I
great,
love you all.
it's a great audience. Yes, thank you so much for staying, everybody. It's only midnight. No, no, it's 10 of 10.
Go have a drink. Go to a party.
No, it's it's time to maybe to wind down and have a little rest time. It's been a big day. Wonderful films. Really enjoyed them. Lots of work that went into all of them. And lots of layering, and I'm glad we talked about sound. Thanks for that question, because it is so important. And you did a great deal of work on it.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Big round of applause. Last. Thank you, audience, for being here and staying so late.